Welcome to this public meeting of the Board of Education. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We are always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting involves an opportunity for those attending to comment on items on the published agenda or other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation. Law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We desire that our meetings provide useful opportunities for the communication between the board and the community. Thank you for attending. As required under the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice was given for calling this meeting. It was authorized by the board and forwarded to the municipal clerk, Princeton Packet, and the Times in February of 2019, or maybe in March, and distributed to the schools and others on the standard distribution list. The board reserves the right to enter into executive session during all meetings of the Board of Education. Board Policy 2230, recording devices, requires that we inform those attending this meeting that the proceedings are being recorded on video. This meeting is being video recorded and may also be live streamed. The representative of the sending district, Cranberry, is authorized to vote on such matters that affect sending district students or affect the governance of the Princeton Public Schools as more specifically designated in New Jersey statute. In the event that the statute shall be amended, the law shall take precedence over this bylaw. Sending district votes pertaining to personnel actions refer to high school, central, administrative, and district-wide staff only. Votes otherwise are considered abstentions. Mr. Venanzi, would you call the roll?
Beth Barron.
Here.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Here.
Daniel Dart.
Here.
Jessica Deutsch.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Betsy Calver-Baglio.
Here.
Brian McDonald. Present. Gregory Stankiewicz.
Here.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
Present.
Evelyn Spahn.
Here.
Allie Rounds, student rep. Sam Harshberger, student rep.
Here.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for February 26, 2019. Could I have a motion? Michelle? Dan, second. Thank you. Is there any discussion? If none, we have a show of hands. All in favor? Unanimous. Passed. Now we're ready for the President's report. That's me.
That is you.
It's my turn. Welcome to those attending here and all of you at home who are going to tell me tomorrow that you're sitting in bed wearing your pajamas. I'd like to begin by focusing us on our mission as we do our board business. And by way of contrast from the news this past week of all these people who actually committed criminal actions just to get their children into college. You know, the race to nowhere where children are a casualty of our adult striving and anxiety. I'd like to contrast that to our mission here in the Princeton Public Schools. As board members, administrators, and educators, our mission is to prepare our students for lives of joy and purpose as knowledgeable, creative, and compassionate citizens of a global society. I hope that that can frame our meeting tonight. And as for joy, I want to give a shout out to the cast and crew of Shrek and Anything Goes, and the smiling faces at the college signing celebration that I was privileged to attend last week. And there's just so many wonderful things happening in our schools that I'm very grateful to be part of this board and part of this district. I want to thank the board for the hard work and the many questions that we've had over the last month. Again, we are growing as a board to be even more effective at working to achieve our mission, and I really do appreciate that we have so many different varying voices, and I think we're getting some really good work done. I want to thank our administration staff and interims for meeting the challenges of the transition that we're facing in many of our top staff positions and the opportunities that have been presented by the referendum. We are fortunate to have some really great people working with us. In particular, Judy Bronston and Tom Venanzi, who have stepped in as interims, have jumped in the middle of a budget process with some really complicated HR issues, and they just came in and just started working right away, and I think we're much appreciated. In this past month, our board has been hard at work. We've had 2 meetings this month. It's our second. Our committees have had hours of meetings, and you'll hear the reports shortly. The referendum team has been assembled and is up and running, and with the Hvac as our initial focus, and we are developing the schedule for a careful execution of the projects over the next few years. We've also spent hours this month on a difficult budget process, which you'll hear a little bit more about later. And in terms of community outreach and cooperation, we have met with the Master Plan Committee of the Planning Board this month and talked about how the Princeton Public Schools should be integrated into the larger community planning that's going on. And we're really very, very pleased to be in contact with them and talking about some really complicated issues, but having that conversation together. We also participated in the Climate Action Plan Steering Committee and Working Group meetings 2 Saturdays ago at the invitation of Sustainable Princeton to ensure that our schools are an active participant in this larger community process. Again, we haven't been involved all along in the sense of being part of a formal committee, but we are now in contact with them and in communication with these groups and know that they will be consulting with us, and we will be benefiting from a lot of the hard work that others in the community are doing on some of these really tricky problems involving climate change. We do have the largest facilities in the community in our schools. We also have been working on our relationship with the charter school. Bill Hare has kindly agreed to be our liaison to charter. Thank you, Bill. And we'll be meeting with them soon to talk about our shared interests. And in the Princeton Educational Foundation, we are also hoping to work to be a better partner there. And thank you, Dan, for agreeing to be a liaison to the Princeton Educational Foundation. And there's others on the board, too, I know, who are going to be working to help them. And so I just want to say also happy spring break to all of our staff and our students and our families. And I hope that everybody enjoys the next a week off from all of the hectic work that we've been doing. So thank you. Steve?
Thank you. I want to welcome everyone and actually use our strategic goal of wellness to frame the comments that I want to make this evening. And although I did not consult with Beth on what I was going to say, my comments actually mirror some of what you touched on. And I begin tonight with the college admissions scandal. And I know that all of us watched in various stages of I think, disbelief as we learned this week of wealthy, high-profile parents who paid exorbitant sums of money to falsify the applications and admissions profiles of their children with the sole purpose of getting them into what they consider to be a prestigious college. And the scandal, for me, epitomizes the crisis around a belief system that views admissions to an elite college as the hallmark of success, or at least as a prerequisite to success. And such a belief system is wrong. And when it's pushed down to our kids, to our students, whether that's deliberately or unconsciously, it precipitates a wellness crisis among young people who are not getting enough sleep, who are suffering from physical and mental health problems, who are using drugs to self-medicate, or to stay up just a little later to finish their homework, or are cheating simply to stay in the game. So I'm really proud that here in Princeton we're striving to do better for our students. We're striving to change the definition of success and to broaden it to include many different pathways. Certainly any definition of success that would compromise personal ethics is a poor one. In the Princeton Public Schools, our mission, as you pointed out, Beth, it's not about preparing students to get into a great college. It's about preparing students to lead great lives, and that's lives of joy and purpose and character. And so the next thing I want to mention, building again on what you said, is the joy and purpose and character that I think many of us saw on stage in our students' performance of Shrek Jr. at JW and in Anything Goes at the high school. We saw that joy and purpose and character on the face of Chloe Ayers as she won the very first female wrestling state championship. And I think it was Alec Botchin, her teammate, who got 4th in the state tournament and is the most decorated wrestler in Princeton history. And we're seeing that joy on the faces of students as they sort of pour onto the fields for baseball and softball and spring track and boys and girls lacrosse. So it's an exciting time in the life of our school, and I just want to reiterate that we as the adults in the school system will continue to work to ensure that all of our students, regardless of color or economic status, have access to the arts and to athletics, and that's without barriers of resource or barriers of bias. So we continue to work on that. And the last item I want to raise under this sort of framework of wellness has to do with what I consider to be a really serious crisis in our schools, locally and nationally, and it's vaping. It's the use of e-cigarettes, and it's a wellness issue of deep concern on a national scale, and certainly here in Princeton. Estimates are that more than 25% of our students at Princeton High School are vaping or juuling, as it's sometimes referred to. And those estimates are consistent with what I'm hearing from my superintendent colleagues around Mercer County. We're all seeing the same thing. And it's really like a tidal wave of health concern that's hit our schools in the past 2 years, really. The vaping, the juuling, it may sound like it's less harmful than smoking, but I know, as this board knows, the colorfully designed, marketed products contain liquid solutions that are often laced with highly addictive nicotine, with chemicals and sweet flavors that are appealing to young people, but highly unsafe. So e-cigarettes are also being used to dispense crystallized marijuana in an odorless form. And many of the students are using these vaping devices. They're inhaling nicotine and other harmful chemicals, thinking that it's safe. As you know, nicotine is highly addictive, and some of these unregulated products that students are purchasing at vape shops or online contain higher levels of nicotine than cigarettes. So we're trying to educate our students at the middle school and the high school through our curriculum, but we also need to educate our parents. And with that in mind, I want to highlight an event that will be held on April 9th. This is an event that's sponsored by the Princeton Public Schools, by Corner House, by our local police, and by the Princeton Alcohol and Drug Alliance. Did I get all of those right, Jess? Okay. It's going to be held on Tuesday, April 9th from 7 to 9 p.m. the JW Auditorium. It's entitled Hidden in Plain Sight, Do You Know What's Hidden in Your Child's Room? So we have Special Agent Timothy McMahon from the DEA who will be there, and they have a mock bedroom, and they're going to lead people through to see if they can actually find some of the drug paraphernalia or other things that may be hidden in the room. And there's also a special guest, Donna DeStefano, who will be there to sort of talk to parents about how to talk to kids. And how to have the conversations about drug use and the struggles that they may be experiencing. So I want to encourage, I think we might have had a board meeting scheduled for that night, but perhaps we're going to not, so that we have that evening free to be able to attend. And I would encourage those watching tonight to think about going. We also have just created a web page on our new website that provides some wellness and health resources, and so we added some resources there on vaping, some literature, as well as some videos that would be helpful, I think, to families if they wanted to learn more about this crisis that we really are contending with in the Princeton Public Schools. And we're trying to deal with it as a public health concern. We recognize that for many of our kids, it's an addiction, and we're looking to help them with that. At the same time, many of our students may be unwittingly getting solutions that have marijuana, or maybe intentionally, but there could be disciplinary consequences if that happens. So we're concerned about our kids, and we want to make sure that the parents are educated about this ongoing crisis. That's it.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep. Jess, did you want to add anything about the?
I think you covered it. I just would like to, thank you. I think that the idea that we were going to have a board meeting on April 9th, but now could consider not having it so that we could all attend that session, I think would be an important statement that I'd like to make, that we think it's important that this issue, which the title of that session, Hidden in Plain Sight, is really apt. I think that a lot of what we understand so far is the best thing we can do is educate ourselves about what this is and how to see it and how to talk about it. And so I just encourage this board and the community to attend on April 9th. I also will attend a session on Thursday night. I believe some other board members will as well, for the NJSBA training on what board members and parents can do about vaping. So,
thank you, Jess.
Are more than 5 of us permitted to attend?
We are, if we're not having a meeting, we just are observing. We're not talking to each other, doing board business. It's fine. Okay, I think that takes us to item letter G, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, which we covered in closed session, and it's a consent item, so we'll come back to that with the consent. And next, H, is board committee reports, and the first will be from Sam Harshberger, our student representative.
All right, good evening. For our 6th report, Allie and I surveyed students again on this year's new schedule changes in an effort to compare these results with those we collected in October of last year. We asked students for their opinion of the schedule changes more broadly as well, including how often they found themselves in the wrong classroom due to confusion over their schedule, the effect of the later start time on their overall wellness, and how the changes have affected when they wake up and when they arrive at school. A total of 165 students were surveyed, with an approximately even distribution of responses coming from freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. They responded to the survey in homeroom or through a voluntary online Google survey posted in grade-specific Facebook groups. Of the students surveyed, approximately 70% of students sampled saw the new schedule as an improvement on last year's schedule, compared with roughly 2/3 who said the same in October. We observed similar results this time when it came to how students' arrival time at school was affected. In October, around 60% of the students said the new schedule had led them to wake up later in the morning, and the percentage was the same this month as well. Freshmen were still less likely to say this later start time and new schedule have impacted them positively, but this is most likely because they have no means of comparison to last year's schedule. Overall, these results show that arrival times since October were maintained in our second round of surveys. The biggest difference in this month's results were with how much students reported arriving at the wrong class. Seeing that students have adjusted to the new schedule throughout the year, there is now less confusion with the rotating schedules. At the beginning of the year, 60% of respondents said they were never at the wrong class, but this number has now increased to 75%. Only 20% find themselves at the wrong class once a week, compared to 25% in October. Less than 5% of students find themselves in the wrong class more than once a week. We are currently continuing to collect data on e-cigarette and vaping usage throughout the school, and we hope to present this data to you guys next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Do we have any questions for Sam?
I do have one question. You talked about getting up later. How many students reported? What was your data on that? Okay.
I guess, Sam, my question for you is, you had 165 respondents out of 1,600 at the school. Is there some way you might be able to get more of a bigger sample size?
We've been working on that for a while. We found that the voluntary Facebook surveys are usually the best method, but we're exploring other options.
Okay, thank you. I think next we're going to hear from Equity. Michelle?
Sure. Well, Equity had its second meeting on March 11th last week, and it was really gratifying because we had a really nice turnout from the public, from a variety of organizations, parents, teachers. It was just a great group, and they were very engaged and involved in the discussion, which centered around, again, trying to identify which equity challenges the committee is going to be able to focus on over this coming year. And again, we had an extensive discussion around community and relationship building and building internal education equity leadership capacity. The other two challenges, culturally responsive teaching and educational equity professional development, and recruiting and retaining a more diverse staff, are really administrative work. So we talked about how the committee could be supportive. We also talked about the possibility of having this board be exposed to some training in equity, because the assumption is that, and we're the ones that are decision makers, and the assumption is that we understand all the intricacies around equity issues, and we need to be sure that we do understand. So some training is probably called for, so that's something that the committee would like to focus on going forward. And also trying to engage community in achieving equity in our schools, and that's by opening the doors, inviting people in, and encouraging dialogue. So we're going to continue to do that. Also, we have been in touch with the Sba Equity Committee, which is great. They've just started a committee on equity last year, and it's statewide, and they have informational and educational sessions throughout the year. So I'm going to make every effort to participate and invite our community and our committee to participate and kind of keep you informed on what the NJSBA is doing in that area. We've heard some concerns from people in the community around the diversity of the high school musical this year, and so whether or not we deal with that, we're aware of it and we're hearing it, and I expect that there will probably be more input on that issue as well, and we'll see how to handle that going forward. I know Steve is on top of it, as I am monitoring and trying to be responsive as well. And we're looking at how do kids end up in the musical in the first place? What's our process? Is it inclusive? Why is it that way? So there's a lot of education that needs to happen around that issue as well. And our next meeting is April 8th, and Tara Doty is going to be there talking to us, hopefully about community involvement and building our relationships within the Princeton community.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I look forward to the suggestions of the committee on our board training.
The April 8th is in the evening again, correct?
Yes. Yes, 7 o'clock.
7 p.m. Okay. Facilities, Greg?
Facilities has also been very busy over the last several weeks. We held our meeting on March 11th. And for those of you who attended last week's session with the board, that really, we spent a lot of time and engaged in the discussion there on one of the things that our president talked about, which is the rollout and the planned rollout for AC and HVAC. And so we're going to be talking about that, on the agenda coming up as well. But what I appreciated was the fact that we had a chance to engage among ourselves and then in a broader public setting with the full board, and we're going to be building off of that this week as well. On top of that, just to bring everyone up to speed from last week, over these past few days, we actually met for the first time in our weekly meeting on the referendum planning process with all our different partners, so our administrative team, our construction manager, our architect. And we'll, as I said, we'll be meeting every week, and we're just brought a little bit more up to speed on what's going to be presented to the board today in terms of a way of being able to fast track and purchase the first order of AC units so that we could do an installation in one school over this summer, and we'll be talking about that. We also, in the meantime as well, sub-members of the team looked at door hardware yesterday, and there was a sample truck that came with samples, and we'll be reporting back to the Facilities Committee about some of the options there. Along with, there was a meeting of the security team here, looking at the vestibules and the other hardware and other issues involved with security. And we're going to continue to have these regular update meetings. We did talk about, for facilities, is 1 month meeting enough, or do we need to go further? And I know we've had discussion about that before, and so we're going to compare, because we want to make sure that the Facilities Committee is kept up to date as there are opportunities here for input. And then we also talked about, as we develop the schedule, we'd like to also develop a schedule of public events to be able to also keep the public as informed as possible. And finally, just as a quick heads up, they'll be meeting next few weeks about communicating all this and various ways of communicating, because we realize that parents and community members sometimes don't have the time to go to all these meetings, and so we'd like to make sure that there are different ways that we get the communications out and hear back from people. And so we're still putting things together. We're doing that pretty rapidly, but we're also making decisions as rapidly as possible, but also as thoroughly as possible, so that we can hit the milestones that we're talking about for this summer and then for next summer. And we'll talk more in details about that on the agenda. So our next meeting, as of right now, unless we schedule some more, is on April 15th. And Facilities Committee meetings are open to the public. So,
Thank you, Greg. Any questions?
Well, I would just like to build on that and say that I would strongly encourage 2 meetings a month at this critical time. $27 million is a lot of money. The decisions that we make now can have broad implications for years to come. And I think it's a great opportunity for the public to come and participate in open sessions and feel a part of the process. So I would strongly encourage open meetings twice a month, except perhaps in July and August.
Yeah. If I can just respond to both of you. So as Greg mentioned, we're looking forward not only to having facility meetings where the public can come, but actually open forums where we can, at key milestones, where we can announce what we're doing and how we're going to approach it. We're going to be building a website where people can go and look at the construction schedule and look at what's happening in each building and see pictures as it evolves over time. So we're really focusing on the communication and sort of keeping with the theme of wellness. I just would tie the referendum projects that we're focused on this summer to the wellness of our staff and students. So there are really 3 big ones that we're focused on for this summer. One is the HVAC. So that'll be, we're starting with the initial work at Riverside and then going to be scaling up the following summer. So the air conditioning at Riverside and also the gym at PHS. We're going to be looking at the security vestibules at the elementary schools. So the safety, security, wellness of our kids will be associated with that. And then the third large project is the distributive dining station at the main floor of the high school. So how our students get access to quality nutrition is a really fundamental part of the focus for this referendum. And so those are the 3 big projects under the umbrella of wellness for this summer.
And I just want to add that the architect and engineering areas are where school districts, including our own, have run into problems before. And sometimes in haste or an effort to move it forward, you can take those drawings and put bid packages together, and all of a sudden you're locked in. And I want to make sure that when it comes to architecture and engineering, we really take the time to socialize those documents and make sure that people know that the documents are done properly and correctly before they go out to bid. And it may require an expert from the community who might volunteer, knowledgeable people about the projects or the spaces. But that critical time when drawings are done, whether engineering and architecture, but before they go into the bid packages, is the time to catch mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I just wanted to, building on that, acknowledge that we already have people, members of the community, who have been very, very helpful just in the start of the process, including a gentleman from Princeton University who's been reviewing the HVAC and AC. We also have someone with a great deal of experience here in our schools who's come back and has volunteered with that as well, and we're going to continue with that. So I agree. I love the model of what we're doing with the enrollment group. I'd like to develop that further, so I think that's something that we as Facilities Committee should really focus on, where we have the opportunities to keep on doing that, because it's really important, and we have wonderful expertise here in the community that we should be leveraging as much as possible.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're ready for finance. Bill?
Okay, the Finance Committee met yesterday, March 18th, in this room in an open meeting that the public was invited to attend. The committee, in case you don't know, it's made of Beth Barron, Dan Dart, Brian McDonald, and Greg Stankovitz, and myself. In our meeting yesterday, we examined the financial reports and bills of the school district. We also discussed the budget and where we are at in eliminating the gap between revenues and expenses. The proposed budget will be voted on tonight, and then they will be sent to the county superintendent for review and approval. Then in April, we will have a budget workshop, and we'll vote on the final budget. When the budget is finalized and presented at the April budget workshop, I think probably then we'll give a lot more details in a more accurate manner than we get tonight of the budget, because it still could be changed. We, of course, also discuss our ongoing cost savings efforts. To that end, letters are going out to the staff of the district providing them estimates of their individualized cost savings if they switch to a high deductible insurance plan with a health savings account. I don't know if people have heard us talk about that before. Anyway, our insurance company will be presenting to employees of the district on April 2nd and 8th to discuss health insurance policies and how this works and how they can save money. We also discussed moving forward on our analysis of the facilities cost of the district and trying to better understand it and see how we compare to other districts, how we're doing it. Our next meeting is April 22nd at 2 p.m. in this building, and it is open to the public. So if you're worried about the budget of the school district and your taxes, this is the meeting to be at. So please join us.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions on that? No? Personnel, Debbie, please.
Personnel met yesterday, Monday, March 18th. The search has begun for the Director of Facilities. We will update you more next month. Tonight, the board has the pleasure of approving Jessica Baxter as the new principal of Princeton High School. I look forward to her moving into that new position. Congratulations, Jessica. Tonight, the board will be approving a sick leave bank request. Wednesday, April 24th is the Personnel Committee. The Personnel Committee will be meeting all day. I mean all day, with our administrators to review all non-tenure candidates up for reappointment. This is an annual process that is done every April. The book is this thick. The administration attended the Central Jersey Pride Job Fair on March 14th, and they'll attend another career fair at Rider University on April 4th. The board will be approving a reporting change for the Supervisor of Guidance Services K-12. The job originally reported to both the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction as well as the principals. The position will now only report to the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. There are still 19 families representing 24 students who attend the Princeton Charter School who still have not verified where they live to our administration. This month, our attendance officer will be delivering letters requesting these families confirm their residency. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 24th. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Debbie, could you just repeat that charter number?
Sure. There are 19 families representing 24 students who attend the Princeton Charter School who still have not verified where they live to our administration. This month, our attendance officer will be delivering letters requesting these families confirm their residency.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you, Debbie. We're now on to policy. Greg and Jess. Okay.
I will just say two quick things, and then I'll hand it over to our co-chair. Policy committee met on March 8th, and we had a very good discussion on a couple of topics, including some potential policy language that we were reviewing. But the main thing, I think, that what we've been working on for a while now is on vaping. And so before I turn it over to Jess to talk about that, I just wanted to, in my role as a NJSBA liaison, just again sort of highlight something that Jess said about Thursday. For board members, there's a free dinner and presentation on vaping. And I think not only is the speaker very good, but also it's a chance for us to really engage with fellow districts here in Mercer County. So if there's any way at all anyone is interested, I would strongly urge as many of us as can to be there. And the NJSBA and the Mercer County representatives thought it was so important that we actually postponed what was supposed to be the presentation to focus on vaping instead, because it's something that's affecting, as Steve said, not just us, but our entire region and the entire state. So if you want any more details, please see me, and I'll give you more details about that. With that.
So just to really to underline what Steve outlined in his report, we are, as a policy committee, really trying to look at how can we make sure that our policy reflects what is in the best interest, the health of our students. That's our priority. And so we really are looking at this issue, first of all, in the context of our commitment to student well-being, and really from the perspective of how to address an emerging problem based on best practice. And so in the interest of approaching it that way, we will be represented at the NJSBA meeting on Thursday on what boards can do about vaping. We have also posted on our website a section on student well-being, resources for student well-being, that includes both local and state and national resources related to this issue, really framing it from that perspective of educating ourselves and our children, because that looks like what is at a current glance the best way of approaching this. And so we do encourage the community to attend this April 9th session, which will be an opportunity for parents to look at what may be hiding in plain sight. It will also be an opportunity to hear from Corner House Youth the results of the survey that I believe is 500 students from 4 different local schools, including PHS. And so I think that data ends up being really important. You can get a preview of that actually currently. If you look on the website under the resources and you go to the Corner House presentation from last year, you'll hear a local student presenting some of that data. And I think just to reiterate, while we have everyone's attention, I'll just review three of the myths and facts that we've been looking at. One myth being that vaping is a healthy alternative to cigarettes. That's a myth. The fact is that e-juice contains nicotine, chemicals that cause cancer and can lead to health problems, including wheezing, coughing, and sinus infection, nosebleeds, shortness of breath, and asthma. Another myth is that vaping has nothing to do with smoking regular cigarettes. Young people who take up vaping are more than 4 times more likely to smoke traditional cigarettes a year later. Another myth being that it's just harmless water vapor. The reality, the fact is it's not harmless. It's not just water vapor. It contains toxins, potentially cancerous and dangerous chemicals, and may contain combinations of chemicals along with nicotine. There is the myth that vapes don't contain nicotine. 99% of e-cigarettes sold in the U.S. do. All Juuls, 100% of Juuls, which are the most popular items confirmed by our school administration, that's the top choice among teens for vaping. 100% of those contain nicotine, and every Juul pod contains the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So that's what we're up against. That's why we are looking at this not as from the perspective of discipline as the primary lens, but from the perspective of how to address a health problem that's affecting our children. And so we as a board need to make sure that our policy supports that and that we continue to educate ourselves and the community. And so that's what we're doing in policy.
Thank you, Jess. And could you tell us again, if you go to the PPS website, where those resources are? Where do you have to click if you go on the screen?
Yeah, if you go on the right side.
Under resources.
Under
Very bottom.
resources on the right side. Very bottom. So all of you who are watching at home and parents who want to learn about this, it's very important. So go look it up.
Just to say, this is in the context of a much larger district focus on student well-being. That has been a district priority. It remains one, and this is a challenge to it. And so we're trying to address it in a really comprehensive, really compassionate, and really effective strategy that involves the whole community.
Right. So we all have something to learn. Thank you. I think, is there any comment or question on that? No. I think we're on to student achievement. Betsy Baglio, thank you.
Thank you. The Student Achievement Committee met here on Friday, March 1st from 12:30 to 3. The minutes of February 8th were approved at that time. Priscilla Russell, who's here this evening, attends Student Achievement to present to us 2 overnight trips for approval and explain that outreach is done to ensure that all students who'd like to take these trips are able to do so. Regarding process for these trips, a few questions arose this week. I'd like to clarify, the Student Achievement Committee cannot approve the trips outright, but we hear the presentation and we ask questions. Same goes for textbooks and other approvals. But our approval to put these trips on the full BOE agenda is in essence a recommendation to approve. So if it was not approved by those in attendance at Student Achievement, it would not be moved to the Board of Ed agenda. So that said, we have 2 trips on the agenda this evening. One trip was approved unanimously by Student Achievement members. That's the trip to China, as this is a repeat trip. Students stay with host families, and Princeton High School travels to China for an exchange program every other year. Students from China also come to Princeton High School every other year. The second trip to Havana, Cuba was approved by 3 of the 4 Student Achievement members in attendance, and the 4th member cited safety concerns. Students will not be staying with host families in Cuba, but in a brand new hostel. As this is a new trip for the Princeton Public Schools, BOE approval will be pending review and coverage by the district insurance company. Both trips are planned for November of 2019. Priscilla is here this evening to answer any questions from board members after I finish this update from Student Achievement. So thank you for being here, Priscilla. Kelly Curtis, Supervisor of Mathematics, attended Student Achievement to propose new math textbooks for use at JW and PHS in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. She and her team looked at a number of textbook companies, and this series is the one that they chose to go with. The total cost is high, as many people have noticed, $188,000. This reflects the $30,000 savings that Kelly was able to negotiate with the textbook company. Kelly and the math department are excited about the possibilities for teaching and learning with these new materials, and I would just like to reiterate that this is to replace all of the materials for all 3 courses at JW and the high school. Every student, accelerated, non-accelerated, is using the exact same materials that will be brand new. Kelly Curtis and Valerie Ulrich, who's our grants coordinator, updated the committee on a STEM Pathways program summer course for our historically underserved students. Following up on the experience of our students in similar science summer programs, it was determined that another critical way to support our students in higher level science classes was to provide them with additional and necessary math supports. So this grant-funded program that they're developing would include math and science courses during the summer, as well as tutoring throughout the school year. The Student Achievement Committee is very appreciative to Kelly and to Valerie and all of our staff for considering ways to help all of our students, and look forward to hearing more about the program. Kelly continued. She updated the committee about math options for 8th grade, as well as the piloting of new elementary math materials. She'll be back to Student Achievement in April with a recommendation from the Elementary Math Committee. Our elementary schools are currently piloting the new version of Everyday Math, as well as Ready Math. Steve Cochran shared that a new food service RFP has just been revised and released by the state. He has convened a working group, of which I'm part, on behalf of the Student Achievement Committee, to consider the needs of the Princeton Public Schools. The district must revise the RFP to meet our needs, put that out so that companies can submit bids, and a decision must be made by the Board of Ed by June 30th. Annie Kosick updated the committee on kindergarten registration numbers as of March 1st. We also heard updates on topics such as diplomas for students placed out of district, the testing graduation requirement, feedback from and attendance rates of our staff on the February 15th Staff Development Day, our ongoing work in PD work in equity, and the restorative justice work that's happening in the district. So the next Student Achievement meeting is Friday, April 12th at 11:30, and the public is encouraged to attend. Please note subsequent Student Achievement meetings will begin at 11:30 instead of 12:30, and we will meet twice in April on the 12th and the 26th. So I'd love at this point, if anyone has questions for Priscilla regarding the 2 trips that are on the agenda, I'd like to offer you a chance to ask any questions. Okay. Hearing none. Steve, I don't know if you wanted to,
I had a question on the.
I'm sorry, Debbie.
That's okay, on the RFP.
Yeah, turning to that now.
Oh, sorry, okay. No, I just want to understand more, I read what you wrote, and just trying to understand what it might mean about free and reduced or not free and reduced in the high school.
If you went separate.
So one of the interesting requirements from the state of New Jersey is that we have a limited number of food service management corporations that can actually bid on food service in a school district. So in Mercer County, there are only about 6. So that's one of the important factors for the board just to be aware of as we put out the RFP. But we are part of the National School Lunch Program, and so as part of that program, when we provide lunches to our students who are on free and reduced lunch, there are some reimbursements that the food service company gets for those students. They're subsidized to some degree. But there are also a lot of restrictions that the National Food Service, the National School Lunch Program places on school districts in terms of what we can serve. And so if we were to not be a part of the National School Lunch Program, we would not get the reimbursements, but we also would not have the restrictions. And so one option is that when we put the RFP out for bid, that we put it out to bid with all 6 of our schools, the 4 elementaries, the middle school, and the high school, being part of the National School Lunch Program. The other option is that we consider putting it out so that some of our schools are on it, maybe 5 of them are on it, and 1, perhaps the high school, is not part of the National School Lunch Program. The same companies, those 5 or 6 companies, would bid. They would look at the financials. What if without the restrictions, they may be able to serve a higher quality food, wider variety of food, and they can charge higher prices for the food. So if the food management company is able to figure that they can make enough money to be able to compensate for the reimbursements they would not be receiving for the students on free and reduced lunch, and still provide those students who qualify for free and reduced lunch with that same high quality meal, then they can make that bid, and we can take a look at those options. So it's giving us more flexibility. Tom, I know you've experienced this in one of your prior districts. I don't know if you wanted to add to that at all.
I think the challenge that you're going to have with taking one of your schools off the National School Lunch Program is the loss of the federal reimbursement. But the food service management companies, they know the finances inside and out. They have the experience with looking at those types of options. I can tell you in a district where I've worked where we've taken the high school off of the program and saw the success with that program. We then moved to the middle school to do the same thing and saw success there as well. However, that particular district had a very low population that was eligible for free and reduced, so financially it made a lot of sense. So that's the challenge, that's the concern that I would have in going out with that option. Not to say that it isn't doable, but it will be a challenge for these food service management companies to give you a proposal that will be worth considering.
But there still is a free and reduced lunch.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay. That was what I just wasn't sure if I read.
Absolutely, we would make sure that we took care of those students. And then as we build the RFP, the working group that Betsy was a part of, we're looking at salad bars. We're looking at higher quality food, locally sourced, possible organics. We're looking at more sort of personalized eating, more student choice, more accountability, a focus on sustainability as we consider the food service management companies.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question about the people who actually have to eat the food? Because we spend a lot of time talking about lunch in my house. And my question is, all those things you mentioned, sustainability, organic, the 6th grader does not care about that. They want food that is something that they want to eat in the middle of the day. So when we issue this RFP, when we have finalists, is there any quality testing, taste testing by the people who have to eat the food? Not by us.
I think you make a very good point. And one of the people who was part of our working group was actually a local chef, Kobe Farah, who's been working with our JW After School Food Club. So he knows what our kids enjoy, and he's also seen what's being offered at lunchtime. So we had that perspective as we were considering the RFP. But I love your suggestion. I think the more we can get the students involved in a little taste testing, there will be a whole, like with any of these RFPs, like we put them out for bid. It's a 30-day window. We receive those back. We're going to have to interview them, and part of that interviewing is going to be a little taste testing. And they'll go out to the schools, they'll visit, look at our facilities. So yes, if we can involve students, I think that'd be great.
That'd be great.
And we also talked about adding into the RFP, asking the companies, how will you reach out to students and parents to see how people like your food? So once you're here, how are you following up with people? And then maybe reporting structures to the board or a committee of the board to say, here's what we found, this is what's popular, here's the changes we've made. As one of the committee, and the committee included very smart community members, so we're thankful to them for taking part. But someone said, we need to make it look like the food they like to eat in town, right? The personalized choice. What's on your pizza versus my pizza, and so then we thought about including the need for an app, right? So that does the food service have an app or a way for students to pre-order a meal so that they're not waiting in long lines for this personalized food? So yes, I couldn't agree more. I think students' feedback is critical.
I just want to comment a bit about some of the textbooks, and I sat in on this meeting and had the opportunity to go through the books, and I was amazed at the size and the weight, and of course the cost. And I asked the question, and of course the sustainability question too, right? All that paper that we're printing, all those trees that we're killing, and but also we live in a virtual world, and many school districts are transitioning to a virtual education. And I say that not to replace teachers. I say it as a way to save teachers. If we can enhance learning by a blended approach using virtual education and become more effective but also more efficient, then as we go through challenging budget times as we are this year, that hopefully provides more room in our budget. So I did ask one of the staff members if we had looked at virtual education, and her response was, I didn't know that you wanted us to. Now, I didn't have the authority at that meeting. I can't speak for the Board of Education. So I left it blank. But I think whether we move to a blended approach, I think over time we need to transition and embrace technology, both to enhance learning and enhance efficiency. And I hope that we can take the time to look into that so that at some point in the future we can move forward.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I know you and I have spoken about virtual learning. I thought you were going to be making the point about having the textbooks online as opposed to a hard copy of the textbook as a money-saving alternative. And in case some of the people watching were asking about that, because that's a very common question, the way the publishers market their materials, you can't buy the online version. Well, you can, but it's the same price as the textbook. Or you can buy the hard copy textbook for $100 and pay $6.95 for the online version. But you can't pay $6.95 for the online version without the $100 textbook. So we're a little bit of a catch-22 there.
But Steve, is it possible to buy a classroom set of the hard textbooks and have the online version for, say, 2 classes and leave the hard set in the classroom so they're not carrying those books back and forth in their backpack?
There's a little wiggle room with that, but there are actually access codes for individual access codes for the online book. So, yeah.
Okay. And do we or can we leave the books in the classroom from a wear and tear standpoint? Like if they're using the book online, do they take the book
I think
home?
yeah.
And I would also say, I know from personal experience at home, some teachers encourage the textbooks being left at home.
Right.
And then, because they're not really teaching from them day to day, but they're at home for just that wear and tear. I have a number of them lined up in our kitchen. But I think we have to think about, we don't certainly want to force students to be reading textbook versions online. Some, for example, our new biology textbook that we approved last time, but we're approving the purchase of tonight, it's really a narrative, right, for students. And so we're not dictating at this moment how students read the best or learn the best, but I think having, as Steve said, we can't have the digital really without the textbook, and it's the same price to do that, so it's a flexible option.
Okay.
In my experience, I've had several classes where they've had an online textbook offered. Well, you can also take the paper copy in class, and I think this is great because it offers students the choice between whether they want to access it online or actually bring it home and use it then.
Thank you, Sam.
Great.
Great,
Thank you. All right, one more?
One more thing. I just, unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of being on Student Achievement Committee, but I was really intrigued to hear more about the type of offerings that our students have for trips to China and Cuba. So, because Priscilla Russell is here, I just wanted to take the opportunity just to ask a little bit more detail about that for the board and for viewers who don't know the richness of the type of offerings that many of our students take advantage of.
Yeah, you could put him. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So Cuba is new for us, as you've heard. Cuba didn't just come out of the blue. We've had an association with Cuban artists and Cuban movie directors for about 15 years now. And for the first many years, it was all email going back and forth when the Cubans could have access to email. And then some of us have started going to Cuba. I was able to go a couple of summers ago, and we were able to visit the studio of the artists our kids have been communicating, with whom our kids have been communicating all these years. And every year we have movie director Miguel Coyula, who comes to Princeton High School, and he works with the Spanish cinema class and with the French cinema class also. So this trip that we've set up, it's our initial trip, and it's not an exchange. It's the only one of our trips that isn't an exchange, but we're going to be take 30 kids and all stay in a hostel together and have a bus that really works, and meet with a lot of artists and go to, I believe, 2 high schools in Havana. And I have to say that when I was there a couple of years ago, the only time that I was concerned for my safety was when I was on the back of a very big horse out in the countryside. And he kept nipping the butt of the horse in front of us, and I never knew what was going to happen. But otherwise, felt very secure in Havana and out in the countryside. So our other trip going forward in November is to China. And this has been a rather long-standing exchange now. The first time the principal from the Qingdao school came to stay with us, and all the adults stay with me when they come, and I live in town so everybody can walk to schools and everywhere. But we had a little signing ceremony with the principal from Qingdao, and so every 2 years we go, and then they're about to come in May. They're sending their Model UN team, which is one of the top Model UN teams in China, so they're going to be in New York, and then they'll come out and stay with us. In this past November, our other 3 trips went to Japan, to Italy, and to France. And the French exchange has been going on for 30 years with our sister city in Colmar. And our Italian exchange, was the 3rd time that we had gone. And then just last week, our partners from Italy were here. The principal of the high school came, and 39 students. And Japan is interesting because We send a group of about 20, and they stay in people's homes and then do some traveling. And every October, a group of 42 or 43 students come from Japan, and we always look forward to their visit. It's a wonderful school, and I can never pronounce the name, but we have varying numbers of kids who go on these trips. Often the numbers are set by our partners. So when we go to China, our partner says, we can accommodate 30 students. We can find homes for 30 students. And our kids always stay in somebody else's home, and it's one Princeton child to a home. And when our partners come here, it's one child from another school to one home here. So they've, Betsy knows that, I think you used the very kind word tenacious. Last year when I was trying to find funding to ensure that all of kids who wanted to go could go, and we were just delighted we were able to bring, every time we're able to bring several low SES kids and also several children who are special education children. And there were lots of tears last week as the kids from Italy left. And this is usually how it is. So wonderful.
I want to thank you for giving our kids the exposure. I think it makes a big difference in their lives, and for so many of them, this is going to be it. Like, they're not going to get another chance to travel internationally, and I think it makes us a better town and a better country, and I want to thank you for what you do.
Priscilla, Ms. Russell, sorry. I know that colleges really promote semester abroad, and that's something that, you know, we really want students to see. And I think that Princeton's been a model of extending the walls of the classroom through language, through our arts department. And I really applaud the work that you have done for our school for many years, because these trips are, they put a big yoke on your shoulders, a lot of responsibility and a lot of paperwork. So I want to thank you for doing that for so many children and giving them that opportunity for many years. And Sam is nodding. And when I get a nod from Sam, that makes me feel really special. But what I do want to say is that with Cuba, isn't it the criteria of Cuba that you have to have an educational reason? Is that it,
and
right?
it's
So we would be under the umbrella of the arts and education. I mean, I couldn't be prouder. I just think that's an amazing opportunity. I've friends that have been there recently, and I just really do applaud you for expanding and taking on even more, but an opportunity for a country we've never been able to go to. But thank you so much.
Yeah, we've been working on Cuba. We wanted to do this, Marty Hayden and I, for a number of years, and so it's finally come together, and we're excited about it. So
I wouldn't want you to have gone the very first year, so I'm glad to.
Yeah.
It's not something I want to be first on, but I'm glad.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to public forum. Now is the time where we invite the public to come speak on agenda items only, if there's anyone who has a comment they'd like to make. And if you do come up, we ask that you give your name and address and spend only 3 minutes. So if there's no one, we'll move on. The next item is personnel, the appointment of the Princeton High School principal. Steve?
Thank you, Beth.
Take it away.
All right. Well, since Gary Snyder announced his retirement after 16 years as principal of Princeton High School, everyone has been waiting for the announcement as to who will lead that school into the next phase of its really remarkable evolution. And there is a recognition that the position is a critically important one. And so after a national search that yielded close to 60 candidates, and after a comprehensive selection process involving meetings with students, staff, parents, and community members, I am honored and extraordinarily excited to recommend Jessica Baxter as the next principal of Princeton High School. I have a few words to say about you, Jessica, before you come up and say anything or before the board votes. Jessica was highly thought of by every group who spoke with her, parents, students, and staff. She has shown her ability in nearly 8 years as an assistant principal at Princeton High School to care deeply about our students, to effectively lead high-level change, and to get things done on a daily basis. I have tremendous confidence in Jessica. I look forward to working with her and with her team to build on the steps already taken at PHS and to do so in partnership with the community and with a renewed sense of joy for students, staff, and families. Jessica has 2 master's degrees, one in applied linguistics and one in educational leadership. She is fluent in Spanish and has been instrumental in supporting our English language learners, even going so far as to secure for them regular bilingual counseling through an outside agency. She is a powerful voice for equity in our schools. And last spring facilitated a poverty simulation to help staff and community members gain a more authentic understanding of the issues and choices faced daily by some of our families. Jessica was the lead in implementing the Challenge Success Survey at the high school, as well as in analyzing and presenting the results. She truly understands the issues of wellness faced by our students, and she addresses them on both an individual and an institutional level. Jessica does the master schedule at PHS, no easy feat. She is the district's HIB coordinator. She is the go-to person when something needs to be done, and she's able to dream about changes for PHS. Throughout the selection process, Jessica and I have spent a great deal of time talking about Princeton High School and the role of the principal there. Our conversations touched on school spirit and student voice, on community engagement, as well as on the connection between the work at the high school and the changes taking place district-wide. Jessica has a vision of racial literacy for all students, of the implementation of a student honor council, of regular conversations with community leaders about Princeton High School. She believes in schools as places of celebration, and she wants to see more of that for our students and staff. Jessica recognizes the tremendous responsibility as serving as the principal of PHS. She is eager to embrace that responsibility. She is eager to grow as an instructional leader, and I believe she is the right person at the right time to help our high school take the next steps in becoming a beacon of innovation, partnership, and care. I'm honored to recommend her to the board and to introduce her to our community.
Thank you, Steve. Can I have a motion to discuss this item? Yeah, Brian? Yep, second. Greg, thank you. Is there any, would anyone like to have a discussion before we have a vote? Okay, we can move on to, I think we'll take a roll call vote.
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Joyce?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Calver-Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Punder?
No.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion carries.
One objection. Michelle Tuck-Ponder. Thank you. I think that takes us to our...
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jessica. Would you like to say a few words? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica Baxter. I'm one of the assistant principals at the high school currently. I've been there for 8 school years. This is an honor, and I just want to express my appreciation and gratitude to everyone for this. I've had the support from Gary Snyder as a mentor and a dear friend, teachers, administrators, assistant principals, Steve Cochran, and the board. At this appointment, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to what lies ahead. I know where we've been. I know there's a lot of work to do. We've made strides in the past 2 years in many areas. And going forward, I have a lot of ideas. I know we have a lot of work to do in the areas of student engagement equity, student wellness, and I truly believe we can have a healthy school that is academically strong and where our kids feel inclusive when they walk through those doors every day. I feel joy when I go to PHS. Throughout the interview process, people ask me, what's your favorite part of being assistant principal? And it is standing in the hallways, greeting staff and students in the morning and throughout the day. I look forward to my new role. It is a role and responsibility I do not take lightly. And just thank you so much. I'm very excited and very anxious to get started. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you and welcome to the new role. Our next item is J2, the personnel actions. I believe that that's going to be a roll call. Could I have a motion, please? Bill? And second, Betsy? Would like to go to a vote? Tom, would you like to call roll? Thank you.
Beth Barron?
Yes?
Debbie Bronfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Calber-Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Motion passed, unanimous. Next item is J3, which is the job description for the Supervisor of Guidance Services. It was described earlier as there's a change of role responsibility. Reporting. Can I have a motion, please, for the item? Yes, Michelle. Second, Dan. Is there any discussion? Should we have is that a roll call vote, Tom, as well? Or is that can we do a show of hands?
You can show hands on
Let's
that.
do a show of hands. All in favor? Yes, Steve?
There was an, did you get the additional copies of the hard copies of the revised version?
I saw an email come out.
It was circulated in advance
Yeah.
of the meeting.
Yes. So
There was the wrong version in the original
Yes.
agenda, and then we had an updated one before the meeting. I think we've seen that. Does anyone have any
so
questions?
I just want to make sure, the one posted here is the
The old one? But we have seen the new one.
You have seen the new one, so I just want to make
You all
sure.
received that? Okay, so are we ready to go for a vote?
Yeah, okay.
So,
Thank you.
Show of hands.
a show of hands, all those in favor? Motion passed, unanimous. We move on to K1, grant acceptance. Now we're going to start, I think some of these are consent that we'll do later. The first is a consent item, grant acceptance, ACH Hvac Professional Development Grant. I think we'll just move on. And then the second one is K2, purchase of materials, Cengage Learning, and this is an action item. I believe it has to do with the textbooks. And can I have a motion? Bill? Second? Betsy? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Can we do a show of hands? All in favor? Unanimous? Passed? Next item is K3, purchase of materials, W.W. Norton and Company. Again, this is another textbook. Can I have a motion, please? Michelle, second. Greg? Any discussion? No? We'll have a show of hands. All those in favor? Unanimous? Passed? Next item is K4, purchase of materials, Pearson Education, again, another textbook. Can I have a motion, please? Bill, second Betsy. Any discussion?
Just to note, it's the 3 textbooks I spoke about earlier, and then a much smaller purchase that was approved last month by the board. This is the approval of the purchase, so it's actually 2 different math purchases.
Thank you.
I just add that I was grateful to learn that we worked hard to negotiate a lower price. I was heartened that that's something that we do and sometimes do effectively.
Yeah. Thank you.
We push on it every meeting.
Yes, we do.
Debbie actually offered to drive to Boston to
She
deliver
did.
the books for free, but we decided there were too many books to likely fit in a car.
So all those in favor of K, show of hands, please. Unanimous, passed. Okay, next is number 5. What is it?
This is actually the textbook we just said we would purchase.
Oh.
This is the approval of that text.
I see.
So
again, any motion? Greg, second Betsy. Any discussion? Question, Michelle?
No.
Okay. All those in favor? Show of hands. Motion passed, unanimous. Number 6, student day field trips. This is another action item. Could I have a motion, please? Betsy, seconded Bill.
But before we approve, so we've been
Yes.
talking a little about, we've been doing a lot of talking about field trips. And one thing with the elementary schools is we've been working on getting them all to be similar. And so when Annie comes back, we're going to add a little more to the elementary one. Because what was confusing to me, it said grade 5, and it's for all 4 elementary schools. But this is something that we would know. And also, Betsy suggested adding who would be funding it, because sometimes it's PTO, sometimes it's school. Well, just give us all more detail.
Great.
And
So
everything.
those would be new columns, on the form,
Yeah.
just to give a little bit more information. But this is one of, as Debbie said, one of the town-wide, we've moved to this for some of the field trips, but just to ensure an equitable experience that all of our elementary students have. This is a new field trip that all of our 5th grades are taking. In addition to Gettysburg, that is still one of them as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We take a vote. All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous, passed. Thank you. Item 7, student overnight trip Mandarin language immersion experience. Can I have a motion?
Can I ask a question?
In a second.
Motion.
Motion first. Brian, second. Greg. Discussion. Michelle.
Just one question. What is the cost of this trip?
Oh, yes, that is, I can look that up for you. I believe it's $3,700, which was given to the Student Achievement Committee. Let me, I will look that up. Let me also say that there is a grant that Priscilla accesses for this specific trip to China that she spoke about at the Student Achievement Committee, but she also works with nonprofits in town and other partners to ensure that any student who would like to go is able to go. But let me just look that up. Sure.
How do you demonstrate an inability to pay?
Well, we've had many discussions that the onus should not be on the child, right, or the family, but to have a consistent statement anytime, actually. I'd like to see it anytime a parent's ask for any money within the schools. But, you know, this is something that I think she could speak to better than I could, but I know that we are not asking students to go to the teacher. Personally, correct. I know for the music department, they ask parents to sign, a sort of a pledge of what they're able to pay of the total cost, and they know that about a year in advance, so they know how much fundraising has to take place. I just don't remember off the top of my head if foreign language is the same. I'm not sure. Steve, I don't know if you know that. Okay.
I don't think it is.
And let me look up this information for you really quickly about the cost.
I think it's about 37.
I think 3,700 is what I'm remembering.
While you're checking, I think
Yep.
we should be consistent, and because parents are listening, and, parents in lower school, if their children participate in language or music, they're likely to get on a plane to go somewhere, so we really should be consistent
Absolutely.
in how we do this, and so that the process is equitable, it's easy, and that, it's the onus is not on the child or on the teacher, because you just never know what a family situation
Absolutely.
is.
Right.
And we shouldn't, it's not really something we want to miss.
And that's kind of my point. I would love to see consistency. I would love to see, if you're on free and reduced lunch, I mean, that just some things that make it less, it's not easy to say, I can't afford it, and in a wealthy community. And so
Absolutely.
if we're consistent across music and language and kind of all these things, and parents know what the process is, I just think it makes things, a little bit there.
And that's a lot of the work that we started to do in equity last year was looking at exactly what we're talking about now, just a consistency so that we're not putting especially a student in that position, but you're absolutely right for parents as well. One thing to note is that the fundraising capability of the music department is very different than the foreign language department. So we have talked in a great deal about how to make things more equitable in that they're the same processes, but we know the performing arts department can hold a concert and raise a great deal of money right off the bat, whereas foreign language classes may have a more difficult time doing that. I'm searching I'm searching for this. I will be right with. Can we table this and go back?
Do you want to table it until you know the price, or are you ready?
I would like to know what the price is,
like
and I'd like for the public to know what the price is too.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we come back to that one then?
And the same question for the other trip too.
We have. I definitely. Excuse me. I'm sorry. That was on what was sent out to the entire board, and let me just get that. The Cuba. I sent out the Cuba information, and it is, I believe. Oh, hang on. What? Thank you.
Oh, that might be it.
The Cuba trip is $2,999. That includes any fees for that are required. And then the form that was given to us for the trip to China was $3,350.
Does that include a passport?
No.
Okay.
No, but that's one of those hidden costs that we've talked about quite a bit. Not only passport and passport fees and the ability to arrive at the post office when the post office is open with both families, but also, do they have luggage that is suitable? There are many variables that it's not just, you're absolutely right, it's not just the cost, but there are many other costs as well. Thank you, Michelle, for bringing that up.
Betsy, the only other question I'd have, and I ask every time we have these overnight trips or these weekend trips, are what are the instructional days missed?
So these are both over the November week, when actually this year Election Day is not a school day, and the NJEA days are not a school day. So for example, the trip to Cuba is November 2nd through 9th, so I would assume there's only 2 instructional days missed. I don't have the calendar in front of me, but I think Election Day is the 5th, and then, so in that situation, I think the trip to China is 12, you just put that away, but I think it was, what, Halloween is the day they leave? Mm-hmm. Yes. And they return maybe the 12th. So, but that is something we actually asked for that data in student achievement, I think it was last spring, where we asked, are there any students missing an exorbitant number of days for multiple trips? Or any, whether it's a performing arts trip and then they go on the trip to Italy. And there were very few, actually, who were missing a good number of days for those reasons. Let me ask a question to the board. Would you like to see the total cost of a trip, or maybe we talk about this at the end during board business, what would you like to see going forward for all trips? So we've had some questions this evening of additional information. Student achievement looks at all of those, and as I said, we are not a quorum, so student achievement cannot approve something for the board, even if the committee wanted to. But, and often when we receive these agendas that Patty sends out, this information is in there, not always if it's a late edition, but is there information before board meetings that you'd like to have for these? So we can talk about it later, we don't have to answer it now.
Did you find the China price, did you say?
Yes, $3,350.
Okay, all right, so are we ready?
Follow up on a point Michelle made earlier, which is about the ability of all students to go, not just the ability, but the inclination. And so I'm curious whether we look at who signed up for these trips and whether that represents, a full cross-section of students, because, two parts of the puzzle there.
Yeah.
So for the Cuba trip, it's for students who are enrolled in the Spanish cinema course, which is our course beyond the AP course. Mm-hmm. For Spanish. So as we're looking at through the science and math program offerings, we're really looking at, are all students able to access all courses? So for the Cuba trip, and they're only able to take 30 students, those are the students for whom this trip is offered because it relates to what they're studying. But the question we could ask is, are all students, if they'd even like to, who'd like to stay in Spanish that long, are they able to access that trip? And those are all questions that we're actively asking.
Are we ready to do a vote on the student overnight trip, the Mandarin language immersion experience? Are we ready? You have another question?
I just want to, the safety issues, that was not for this trip, that it was for the next trip? Okay.
Yeah. So for the Mandarin trip, could I see a show of hands, all those in favor? It passes unanimously. So item 8 is the overnight trip to Cuba, the Spanish language immersion experience. Could I have a motion? for that? Brian, second. Greg, discussion?
I will just say that I've been to Havana with my daughter, and we felt very safe the entire time. And I've been to many Caribbean islands where I felt unsafe unless I was on a resort with armed guards. And we walked freely throughout Havana during our time there and had a wonderful experience and found the people warm, friendly, and very gracious.
Yeah, I just second that. Had a chance to go on an arts exchange 2 summers ago to Havana and some of the other parts of Cuba that are not too far from Havana, and felt very safe the whole time. I mean, really very, very safe. And I went the day after the State Department raised it from a level 2 to a level 3 travel advisory due to the sound-related issues that unknown cause at the embassy. And it's since been moved back to a level 2, which I'd note is the same as China. And also a lot of other countries that we send our kids to, like Italy and France, and Spain and Belgium. I mean, it's that the State Department puts it in a group of other countries that
Yes.
we're very happy to send our kids to.
Thank you.
Does our board have a policy on what our sending threshold is? Let's say it reaches a level 3. Do we have a no-go policy?
We don't right now. So we'll revisit in
I mean,
policy
typically
debate.
the travel agents do, and there's travel insurance that, you know, for that type of thing, but we really should be.
So just a note on that. I had trip insurance, and it's by the major provider, and they didn't care whether it was level 2 or level 3. They, you know, the fact that it was elevated to level 3 was not a reason to get a refund.
Yeah.
So it is something worth
Right.
looking at comprehensively.
Yes.
You know, with,
I'll note that our approval tonight for the Cuba trip will be contingent upon the ability to obtain insurance coverage, because we do notify our carriers of our specific trips, and they have to approve those.
And I'll also note that our current policy on trips does say the board reserves the right to cancel any trip at any time. So that is perhaps too broad, correct?
No, but at least we have.
It allows
okay.
us the ability,
Sure.
if there's a concern about safety. And Michelle, just going back to your question about how do we identify these students, I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention that when Priscilla comes to speak, she talks about what a community it is within the high school, that they know who students are who may not be able to access the trips, and they are proactively, they're not waiting for families to come to them, but they are proactively reaching out to them. So
Yeah, she was explicit about that.
but we'll get more information to share with everyone.
All right, are we ready to move forward? All those in favor of the overnight Spanish language immersion, show of hands, please. That is, okay, that's 9 in favor.
Who's against?
1, Ms. Bronfeld. So the motion's passed, 9 to 1. That takes us to Section L, Student Services Special Education. And we are on L1, Professional Consulting Services, and that is a consent item. So we will, if there's no discussion, we'll move that until later. Item 2 is Educational Placement of Handicapped Pupils, 2018-19. That is a consent item. Any discussion?
L2, is that just for one person?
I believe so, yes.
Appears to be. Okay, then we go on to item M. Business, Finance, Plant, and Transportation Operations. The superintendent recommends 1, adoption of the tentative budget 2019-20. Can I have a motion for discussion? Greg, second. Bill. Do we have some discussion on this item?
I do.
So we've talked about this last week. We had a discussion about the budget. And my sense about budgets is that a budget is nothing but a policy document. A budget speaks to your values. It says what you think is important, and that's where you commit your resources to the things that you think are important. And this is a district that constantly points out that equity is a priority for this district. And so consequently, then this budget should exhibit equity as a priority. We've talked about the difficulty in cutting, which we have to do because we have to have a balanced budget and we have to make certain sacrifices. And we've also talked about addressing changes that are going to have a long-term impact over the course of time, and how we'll have to make changes that are going to cause pain and that are going to be opposed by many people in this community who may believe, for example, that smaller class size is something that we all desire, or whatever the things are that we need to have supplemental science in our elementary schools besides what the classroom teacher teaches. It's kind of all these things, these bells and whistles that we've become really accustomed to in our district. And so even though we talk about equity, what we really value is the highest, having the kind of extras that give our students a leg up. So my concern about this budget, and I said this last week, is that when we cut and when we say, okay, we've got to make cuts, my sense is that those cuts disproportionately disadvantage the most vulnerable people in our district. And it's not a equal, or it's not a decisions, we don't make decisions that disadvantage or take back some advantages from people who are already privileged. So for example, we have 36 AP classes. Who needs 36 AP classes? Do we ever have a conversation about, hey, let's have fewer of those and redistribute resources? Do we ever have conversations about, hey, let's have larger classes? We don't have those kinds of difficult conversations, but we readily have conversations about cutting things that impact special ed students and people of color and low socioeconomic people in those groups. And I'm not saying that we never look at it in a broader way, but my sense is, in listening to that conversation, is that we're not really addressing, one, we're really not holding equity at the forefront of what it is we do through the kind of budget we have. Two, I think that when we make cuts, it disproportionately impacts vulnerable populations. And three, we're not making the kind of really tough decisions that are going to have a long-term impact in helping us to reduce our expenditures. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
I will say in student achievement, we talk a lot about APs. And at one point we were looking at, we won't add any APs, I will say that. We won't add any more. No, and we were looking at different ways, and I pushed back on this a lot. I think we have too many languages. I've always said we should have bigger class sizes. I do.
And we will next year.
But again, you say that now, but I feel like I've been saying this for a couple of years. I don't feel we as a board want to stand on that sword and say, yep, we're going to have 30 in a classroom. Like last summer, they had the whole thing worked out in terms of teachers at Littlebrook. A bunch of new students came into Riverside. They moved a teacher from Littlebrook to Riverside, and the Littlebrook parents went crazy. So we got another teacher for Littlebrook. So you're right. Again, it's that same thing. What is our policy? What are our rules? What is it we believe in or we will stand up against? Or will we listen to everything coming in? We have to decide where is it we stand. Do we stand behind this budget, or do we stand behind a budget that's, $3 million less? But I don't feel like we've done that as a board, as a consensus to be able to do that. I feel like,
you know, we do. We talk about it. We talk about not adding APs. We talk about we have too many APs. But I agree with you. I don't think the public gets it that to have a better budget, to not raise your taxes, there are some things you're not going to like. And I just don't feel the public who's in our schools wants to hear that or wants to deal with it.
Well, thank you. First of all, Michelle, I agree with you completely about not looking long-term. And also, if equity is a priority in our mission, and it is, that we've all bought into, then we should have money available to it and should protect it. With that being said, I don't think that when I look out a couple of years, and our planning has been so short-term, and the superintendent said to us that this is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult budget to balance. And I know next year's is going to be worse. Why is it going to be worse? Because healthcare costs are going to continue to go up. And a massive amount of this budget, I don't even want to focus on the number because it makes me sick to my stomach, but $12 million is going to drug companies and to health insurance companies, 13% of our budget. That certainly doesn't help equity. And in order to solve that problem, we need to take a multiple year perspective. We just passed the referendum, and some of the interest costs will kick in this year. But the full amount of the interest costs will kick in next year on the entire $27 million referendum, and then our first principal payment will be due. So I like to look out 2 to 3 years and work backwards, rather than to work for a month on a budget and then forget about it till next year. And that's what I'm concerned about will happen here. We'll pass this budget, forget about it for a year, and we'll be confronted and have this exact same conversation next year. There are 3 constituent groups broadly that we have to serve. Obviously, our students, and that means all our students. The second, of course, is our staff. We have an excellent staff, and they're important to our mission. And the third is the community. And many of the people we're concerned about in the schools are also the ones economically vulnerable who are hurt by the tax increases of their budget. It shows up in many ways. You increase an apartment's taxes for a building, and the landlord raises rents. And he raises rents on vulnerable citizens. As a population has aged in America, and there are 10,000 people turning 65 a day, not all in Princeton, thankfully, but 10,000 people turn 65 a day as populations age and living on fixed income. They are economically vulnerable, and we have to have compassion for them. We can't be, to Debbie's point, all things to all people all the time. And we really have to look at this budget strategically and balance the needs of the students, all students, the staff, and the community. And I don't think this budget does that. So I'll be voting no for those reasons. I see that our operating budget is going up by 2.62%, which is 0.62% above the cap because of our rapidly rising healthcare expenditures. Then our debt services payment is going up by 11%. So it's a blended tax increase of 3.17%. Now, when you compound these tax increases year after year, they really add up. And so this year, we're going to be hit with a double whammy, a debt service, and then a 2% operating budget, and then the health adjustment. And then next year will be a double-barreled increase as well. So I think that as a community and as a Board of Education, we're in a crisis, but we just haven't recognized it. That's what I see. And I think we need a all hands on deck And I think we have to begin planning for next year's budget now. Because it takes a year, it takes 2 years, sometimes 3 years to affect change. And if we approve this budget and then wait for another year before talking about it and making some of these hard decisions, we'll be in the exact same place.
Thanks, Dan.
Those are my comments.
I would just note that we are, some of us, the way that our election cycle works is that we end up with new members of the board in January, which really is in the middle of the budget cycle. And as you say very correctly, and so I'm new to leadership, I started in January, but as we look at the way the cycle works for our board is we need to develop our priorities in June and July. And in August and September, we look at how those get implemented in a budget, right? And that starts in the summer, it starts in the fall, we have these conversations. So I look forward to that discussion with this board because I think that on this board we have a lot of really good insight into a lot of the things you just talked about. And I know that we have talked about on the Finance Committee the need for long-term planning. And I think we're very serious about that, and I look forward to seeing how that unfolds because I think we really are going to get something done this year. And here we are. We're at a point in the year where it's our obligation to give a provisional budget tomorrow to the county superintendent for approval. So we're being asked to vote on a provisional budget that you and Brian, well, Betsy was here, but you weren't here in the beginning of the year. The rest of us were, but our processes maybe can get better this year, and we can be more involved in setting priorities, as Michelle has suggested. So I personally look forward to our kind of getting better at this going forward, and I kind of agree with both of you that we need to really, and with Debbie, we need to step back and say, what are we doing for the longer term? How are we going to make this sustainable for our students? Because we do have this crunch. It's been coming for 20 years. And we're there. We're at the wall. So, Steve, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I would. Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, just to correct a few things, the operating budget actually went up by about 1%. It was the tax levy increase that's going up by 2.62%. So the total general fund budget that's being recommended, it's a 1.017% increase, or $1.475 million. Remember that the tax levy is $78 million, and so it's the 2.62% on the tax levy of $78 million, but the operating budget has actually only gone up by 1%. And that's because we have looked really hard at trying to make cuts that are equitable, and I appreciate so much where you're coming from, and my heart is there as well, Michelle. Like, I am committed to equity. I see our budget as not dollars and cents, but it's about people and programs and values and priorities, and it's also about creative solutions. And I will say that in looking at this budget and our attempt to balance it, I had an administrative team, a teacher leadership, support staff leadership who came forward with creative solutions that allowed us, in some cases, to actually do more with less. So this was a difficult budget to strike, and it will be, like you said, Dan, it will be more difficult next year. But I'm thinking back to a week ago where your colleague to your right talked about this as climate change and recognizing that this has been happening for years and saying we need to take the long look at this. And we need to be looking at ourselves and how we can do things differently. And we also need to be advocating at the state level for what the state may be able to do differently with their funding formula. And I was proud that this board stepped forward and said, we need to be advocates at the state level to make change. And I was proud that this board took a look at some hard cuts that we made across subject areas. There are staff cuts that we are going to have to make that affect every student. And yet, our priority has been, as much as possible, to keep the high-level learning intact and to keep the cuts as far away from our kids as possible. And I'm proud of some of the creative solutions that we've done to achieve that, and I'm proud of some of the community partnerships we're trying to create that will help continue to support our work in equity. So this budget crisis has driven us to some creative solutions, and that's not a bad thing, to some community partnerships, and that's not a bad thing. And we have managed to balance it, and it's not done yet. Like, there still is opportunity to make changes prior to the final budget hearing, April 23rd. And even once that budget is struck, if there are adjustments that become available to us as time goes on, and there will be things that happen. If we have more staff, for example, I looked over to Mr. Hare here, who decided they want to sign up for the health savings account that will significantly lower the health care costs that you're concerned about, then there will be some funding that will allow us to do more. But it really takes all of us recognizing the fiscal constraints that we're facing, and all of us working together on behalf of our kids to make difficult decisions and stick to them, but also to come up with creative solutions. And I feel like that's the path that we're on as a district.
Can I quickly jump in to Michelle's point about the equity? I wrote down 6 little bullet points here of the things that I know in finance over the last year, and then this year we've looked at, and I can't think of a single thing that is objectively unfair to anybody. Health insurance. I cut my health insurance costs in half with the same stuff by going to a high deductible plan. Best thing I ever did. So that doesn't affect equity, because I've personally been through it. Pharmaceuticals, switching from a brand to a generic, going from the specialty out of the district's plan to someone in-house and saving huge amounts of money. Supervisors teaching, we've thrown that idea out, having them teach a course or two. That, I don't see any equity pluses or minuses there. Substitutes, Debbie's talked about this, trying to rejigger our substitutes so we do it more in a different way where we're paying less on that. We talked yesterday in finance. When we were talking about the facility stuff, we were talking about all the energy savings we could have, the inefficiencies in energy of some of our buildings, long-term savings there. Transportation, we talked a little bit about the buses. We're going to be voting on something today, renewing contracts, and you look at those things, and those are expensive, and then people tell you, well, the buses are half empty, and it's not the optimal situation, so if you can do that better. But so those 6 things that we've been talking about and pushing about that could help long-term, none of them adversely affect equity. I don't know if they actually improve equity, but they all cut costs. And so I feel like for the last year and 3 months, we've been trying to cut costs in a, value-neutral way. Just purely, no one would be worse off today except for the power company. And some substitutes that wouldn't be here because we wouldn't need as many. So, I know that when Beth and Greg and Debbie and I last year on finance, we were looking at cost savings, and I have trouble thinking any of it would hurt any student. But I'll be quiet now.
All right.
No, I just want to pull one thing, and it's wonderful, and I know you're trying, and you talked about a lot of good things. Let's talk about busing. So, who gets bused in this town? Who gets bused from point A to point B? So the kids that live in the John Witherspoon neighborhood, here's Community Park here. Where do they go to school? Johnson Park. I live across the street from Reading Circle, public housing. Those kids, they're in the Community Park neighborhood. Where do they go to school? Littlebrook. So when you talk about busing and the expense of busing is on the backs of the kids who live in low socioeconomic circumstances. So when we talk about equity, and even though that may not be something that you're totally familiar with how we decide who gets bused. And Brian and I had this conversation last week when we talk about this commitment to neighborhood schools. Well, for who? Mm-hmm. If you get bused across town, then that's not a commitment to neighborhood schools. So when we talk about, and that's why this board needs training. Because when you say that to me, and I'm, as you know, I'm a public housing commissioner, the back of, well, whatever hair I have left after being a public official in this town, the hair I have left stands on end, because it is about equity. It is.
And this topic, Michelle, of looking at the possibility of needing to redistrict, many of us have talked about for a long time. So I would very happily put my hand up to say we absolutely have to look at that. For all of our students in town, especially the students for whom we bus much further from their homes than we should. So I'm all for that, and I think that whether it's a cost savings or not, even if it costs us more to do it and it's the right thing to do for these students, that's something we have to look at.
Okay.
I think the only thing that didn't get repeated from some other great
week.
conversations is the, to the extent that we can use data to make a lot of these decisions more than we currently do, I think that would be valuable. I think it will help with equity, you know, in some ways. I think it'll help really across the board if we have better information to look at as we have to make what will likely be a series of hard and ongoing decisions.
We have so many challenges in front of us as a board, and I'm grateful to have these people around the table because I think we're up for it. But you know, as we talk about, we started last year, long-term planning. We need new facilities. Our 90-year-old high school, our spaces are too small. And you start thinking, well, how do you explain that to the community? What do we need? Well, you have to look at how many kids are coming. Where are they coming from? Where do they live? How do we bus our kids around? And when did we come up with that? And why? And what's the last time we've looked at that and understood intentionally what we're doing with our children and where we're moving them around? You know, there's all these things that we can take apart, and I think we need to do that as a board. And I look forward to kind of, you know, to working on that more. And we are starting these conversations, and it's a good thing in my mind. And we've had some exciting ideas. I know many of us have had conversations with each other about a lot of these things. So I see good things this year, and I think this is a tough budget, and it's a tough process. It's not ideal, but you know, I think we're moving forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to, if we're going to vote, just express my gratitude to Steve and his team, and to Stephanie, who's somewhere.
Not here.
And Tom.
Maybe she's watching.
I know how hard people have worked, and in hearing Steve describe the cuts, it was clear to me each one hurt him personally, because he felt that it meant we couldn't do something as well as he wanted to do it. So while it may not be a perfect budget, while we all think that there are great opportunities to begin earlier and think about the process differently, I just wanted to, you know, say I really appreciate the effort that you and Tom and many senior administrators have put in to balance a budget in a very, very difficult year.
All right. Greg?
I just wanted to thank Brian for making that point, and I think that's a very valid point. I also wanted to thank all my colleagues on the board, because all of us, I think, can agree that we're at a crisis point, and I think all of us can also agree that a budget is a document that reflects moral values as well as numbers. The one thing that I also, and I shared this with the board as well, is that the NJSBA at its board of directors meeting on Friday emphasized that where we are in the budget process at the state level. So over the next 3 months, there's still an opportunity to make some changes. There's still an opportunity to advocate, and that's why I so much appreciate the board's and the administration's commitment to advocacy, because some of the crisis issues that we're not facing alone. Many districts across the state are facing it as well. And so some of the things we can tackle alone, other things I think we should work together with other districts to try to make changes wherever possible, because it's going to take more than one solution to get through over the next few years. And you're right, it's a multi-year process. So we've got 3 months now to really focus really hard at the state level, as well as here can still have chances to make some changes, and then we can start again for the following year.
Thanks, Greg. Want to move forward with the roll call vote?
Beth Barron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Daniel Dart,
No.
Jessica Deutsch,
Yes.
Bill Hare, Betsy Calber-Baglio,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder,
No.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries 8-2 with 2 objections, Michelle Tuck-Ponder and Dan Dart. I think that it brings us to item M2, travel expenditures, 2019-20. That's a consent item. Is there any questions on that? We'll come back to it.
Actually.
Yeah.
Because what confused me is the maximum is 65K, and last year, or up until now, we've only used 23. I guess I was curious why it was so high. Like, why don't we just lower it?
Is it that there's
Am I
more
reading it
summer
wrong?
travel that hasn't
No.
been expended?
To date.
That's
Right.
the thing, because there's still more trips to go. Like,
Well, how much did we spend last year?
I wouldn't be able to answer that at the table.
Yeah, no, I
Sorry.
know.
Especially since I wasn't here.
No,
But to Debbie's point, Tom, when we say that's a not to exceed number, are we allocating that money or holding that money for,
That's how much is in your budget for next year.
okay.
So actually, that is wrong. So right now, if we're saying 2018, 2019, to date, we've spent 23,000, okay? And we're in March, so we have April, May, June. We really have
Right.
3 months where this is showing that we have 44K.
So is
So
this
I would
something
love
we
to
can table
lower-
this? Can we table this one for today, or does it need to be
No,
done?
that has to go with the budget.
Oh, it has to go with the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
But because this is just a tentative budget, right? We can look at it for the,
Well, keep in mind, you're establishing a maximum for next year. So
I
if you
understand
want,
that,
if you
but
want to lower that next year, there's no problem at all with doing that in your proposed budget for next year, if that's where you want to go with it.
well, at this point, we've only spent a third.
Well,
and we have
M9,
3 months.
M9 is probably not included in that, and that's 7,500 or 7,600. So it could be that in the next 3 months, I'm not sure we get to 65, but there are
It's
more
not clear
expenses.
when it comes, with the timing
And-
of it is.
And what I'll do is tomorrow when I'm in the office, I'll look at what our travel expenses were for last year, and I'll share that information with the board so you have it.
Thank you.
And I have a related question. I was going to actually ask at M9, but it relates here. Do we ever, or what's the process for keeping track, or do we at all keep track of travel per staff member? And I am an educator, and I took certainly, there were many wonderful learning experiences, but I just didn't know if in our district, do we have a maximum? When someone approves these trips, are we looking at what other things that the person has gone on within the year or prioritizing them?
Contractually, our administrators get a certain amount for professional development that would include workshops and travel associated with that. I think it's 4,000.
For themselves.
For themselves,
right.
yes. So yes, there's a governor on the
But then
amount.
teachers obviously go to conferences and things as well.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So are we comfortable leaving that in? I mean, we need to have it with the budget, unfortunately. We can't table it. So item 2, travel expenditures.
No, I know. Tom just said he would get back.
So you're comfortable leaving it in for the consent tonight? I mean, it is.
For tonight,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay,
he'll get
okay,
back,
good.
and then if it looks like we're really not going to spend
Right,
it,
it's high, we can always, right.
then we can bring it down
Okay.
for the April 23rd, correct?
Well, yeah, let me try it again. This is you're just informing the state with our budget submission what our maximum travel amount is for next year. You could spend whatever amount you want below that, and you can adjust your budget however you want below that. You just can't go above it.
Right,
So if we're going to adjust our budget with the final adoption, say down to 40,000, whatever that is, your maximum can still be set at 65. It's just that our budget right now would reflect it at 40. And the only way that we could spend more is if we ran out of money and we had to do a transfer. And you have the blanket to support that by establishing a $65,000 maximum.
But doesn't our budget right now have 65?
yes.
Okay, so if I'm wrong, if we made it 44,
then that's 21
But you
that
could
comes
still
out.
establish a higher maximum than what you've budgeted.
I want a lower
Right,
maximum.
she wants to take it down, that's
Well,
all.
and I also think what Steve said is important, that if our administrators contractually have a $4,000 travel
You have to have the
allowance,
budget for it.
we have to have at least 4,000 times every administrator, plus just, I assume,
So there's-
perhaps not.
There's
So-
more data here, so
Okay.
we'll find out. There's
Right,
more to
I
learn.
mean, but that's what he said, yeah.
But you're not, there's the, changing it in the budget is separate than what you're voting on here. What you're voting on here is just an allowable maximum.
It's a ceiling. It's a ceiling.
I understand it's a ceiling, but am I not understanding this correctly? Say we all decided we wanted it at 35, okay? Just say we did. After you did research, you said, oh, you guys never spend more than 35. And so for the April 23rd budget, we bring it down from 66 to 35. Doesn't that reduce our budget, or am I missing the whole thing?
It does. It does.
Okay.
But this is many of you weren't around when the state came out with the accountability regulations in 2007. It's a 200-plus page document regarding regulations. Most of it centers around travel expenses. So you see all this stuff that comes to you now on these travel and related expenses that you get every month that have to be approved in advance. All of that is dictated in those accountability regulations. So what the state was trying to do was to control costs on travel expenses. So this is just another way that they can do this for boards by saying, you have to determine what your maximum travel budget's going to be, and you can't go beyond that. My fear is if you lower it down to, say, $35,000 and you want to say that that's your maximum, and we have contractual obligations and administrators decide that they want to take advantage of that and we don't have enough, well, now you've created a problem for yourself. I'm suggesting give yourself the flexibility of at least covering your contractual obligations. If you want to budget differently, that's a different story.
All right. So could I ask for the last 2 years?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, so next is financial reports. There's an action there. So, that's just,
Consent.
that's the monthly financial reports, got
Yep.
it. Can I have a motion, please?
I'm sorry, Beth.
I'm on number 3, M3.
That is a consent vote.
Yeah, is it a consent item?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. Withdraw it. So as a consent item, we'll be back to that. When we do the consent. And then I believe we're on, I'm sorry, M4, which is the unit ventilators. Authorization to purchase the unit ventilators. Can I have a motion? Dan and Brian, first and second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes. So I'm curious, and I know at CP and Littlebrook we have air conditioners in the windows now. What are we going to do with those when they do those rooms also? And I don't know if our Riverside actually has air conditioners in some of the rooms. Are we going to try and resell those to somebody? Are we going to make money on any of our excess stuff we're pulling out of our walls, our windows?
I have to think about that. That's, I mean.
Because the CP ones, I think, were just put in last year, and Littlebrook was just like a year and a half ago.
CP did have some, so this was just making sure that all the rooms at CP did. So I think we spent around $11,000 on in additional air conditioning units. So that we can decide that. It's a good question. Maybe we could.
Well, is that something that our like Epic and Spiesel would even help us with, like reselling? I don't know what you call it. Reusable, reselling?
They're window units that you would buy at Lowe's or Home Depot. So they're really not for institutions. But they could be for homes.
Right. No, I'm just saying, is that something that they do? Do they help us try to get any money back from any of the stuff that we're pulling out of the walls?
It's a good question. I guess we can just look into that. Can we kind of take that under consideration and come back?
Typically, when you're going to dispose of property, you have to go through a public sale, so a bidding process. So you would put them up for public auction to see if there was anybody that would be interested in buying them at whatever highest bid came in. So that would be the process that you would follow. In the event that you were unsuccessful in doing that, then you could explore other options on how to get rid of it.
Great. I'll just comment. I mean, do you want to comment? This is what this is about. Greg, just recap for us. We talked about this in great detail at our last meeting last week, and so I just think now we're finally voting on it. I think it does help to have a quick recap of what we talked about last week.
Sure, and also, you know, Steve, Tom, I mean, any one of the board members can please jump in as well. But what we talked about last week was we deliberated first in the Finance Committee and then as a board if it made sense to do the HVAC replacement of the AC units in one site for the summer of 2019 because we have such tight time frames coming up given that the referendum was in December. And the Finance Committee's sort of ethos, Facilities Committee ethos was to make sure whatever we do deliberately and we do it well. And so the discussion was, as much as all of us want to see, you know, replacement units in all of our elementary schools, all of our other schools, we didn't think that this is something that we have enough lead time for the summer of 2019, so the work will have to be extended to summer 2020. We felt, and we recommend to the board, that it makes a lot of sense to do one full school. We looked at the schools that made the most sense as candidates, and we felt that Riverside and Littlebrook were our two smallest schools that did have problems with mold in the past summer, and we thought that one of those two would be a good candidate, and that's how we decided to target it. It's going to be part of the work that's going to be happening next summer. So our superintendent also talked about the other work that's going on at the same time, including the electrical upgrades in all the schools that will allow for the new units to be placed in. So what we are recommending is not only that we purchase enough units to do Riverside for the summer, which would allow Riverside then to create the space needed for the following summer when we do the other schools so that we can move our summer programs into Riverside. But we're also doing it in a slightly different procedure. And the procedure that was recommended to us by our professional team was one that, on the basis of what we asked about, will allow us to get the units to the site as quickly as possible. So what we are asking the board to do here is to allow the administration and the district to prepay for 28 units. The 28 units will cover all the external classrooms in Riverside. By prepaying, we shorten the time it takes to bring the units in. And in order to do that, our VA is recommending that the board authorize the Finance Committee.
Facilities Committee.
Sorry, I keep on doing that. I'm so sorry. The Facilities Committee to basically approve a contract not to exceed a certain amount on behalf of the full board, so that we can make sure that we can get these units done and purchased as expeditiously as possible, so to give us the greatest chance of getting the work done well over the summer. And then we'll be able to take a look at that for any changes going forward for the other schools as well. So that's the vote we're taking here.
And I'll just add that, you know, for the public, this seems like we're just making a very big decision here, or kind of deciding this without background. We talked about this last week. We had probably 5 hours of committee-type meetings about this issue before we even got to last week's board meeting to talk about this, because basically our leadership, we know what we went to the public with on the referendum. We said we're going to get air conditioning in the buildings, but given the timing of our referendum, our professionals came to us and said, well, you guys are crazy. And we're like, no, we want the air conditioning as fast as possible in as many places as possible. We also don't want to do it in a way that's not smart. So we had long discussions back and forth and very good and robust discussions about all the factors that go into how we get these things, how quickly we can get them. Do we do the procurement program, which means we directly buy them from a state-approved vendor versus going out for bid, and we weighed that, and then we said, oh, but there's all these programs in the schools, and by the way, if we try to do all four, it's possible that none of our schools could open in September because these things involve ripping out the walls and the electrical going in, and it completely disrupts the classroom, and you can't teach around them, and you can't do it second shift. And so we had to think about all these timing issues, these logistic issues. We didn't want to impact the student experience in the fall in the teachers' classrooms. So we had these long discussions all around, and you know, feel free to contribute. I mean, many of us were part of that. And so in the end, we took the recommendation of our professionals that they said, okay, do an initial school. In fact, they wanted us to just do a few, and we said, no, let's do the whole school. Let's get this done. And so we ended up choosing this option. And I think, you know, for me personally, I think we had really good deliberation around it. And there's a lot of, you know, we thought about, I think, every aspect that we could. So I'm pleased that we're where we are, and I hope that this will allow us in one school to get this new HVAC, these unit ventilators put in these classrooms and on by the end of October, because we're not going to make next summer at all. This is not like we're going to get our AC. These rooms already have AC in them on these window units. But we will get this full system in one school where we then can see how it works in one building and make sure we understand the complexities of installing it and the types of machines we're getting. And so then we can go on a regular bid cycle for the rest and do it next summer in a very orderly way.
Correct. I would echo everything you said.
Mm-hmm.
Our commitment is doing these referendum projects right.
Mm-hmm.
And we are listening to our construction management firm, the architects, and our community professionals and our own professionals. I had some head custodians come to see me yesterday who said, thank you. We would be all concerned if we were trying to install HVAC units in every building all at the same time. This is the right way to proceed. So by moving deliberately, thoughtfully, starting small with one building, we can then, once we scale up the following summer, we can move much more efficiently and effectively.
I have a question, and maybe for you, Tom. What does it mean that we grant authority to the Facilities Committee?
So what this would do is we could not purchase these units without board approval.
Right.
Because of the amount of money that's being spent. But what the board is being asked to do is to delegate your authority to the Facilities Committee to give that approval in between board meetings, and then subsequently, based upon that approval by the Facilities Committee, the board would be asked to ratify the action of the Facilities Committee.
And that's just because the specific amounts are not final. Is that right? Because
if we had the final amount, we would be here
approving it.
Yes,
exactly.
right.
So I appreciate, Tom, that you did add that not to exceed amount. That I think was very helpful for a lot of us. So it's that you're authorizing the Facilities Committee to look at the final bill and say, yes, this is what we're purchasing.
Yes.
And because timing is so important here. So by going through this process, we may save several weeks. If we had to wait until April 23rd when we're meeting again, we may be losing 3 weeks.
Right, but aren't we buying specific units from a specific manufacturer?
Yes.
But they require a lead time of like 12 to 14 weeks to be built. I think they're custom built.
No, but you're going to put the order in before they're built.
Right,
I guess I was curious. I was a little confused how Facilities was getting authority, because I thought we, as the board, are approving it right now, and that you would
Well, I don't
place
have
it.
the exact amount for you to approve.
No, I understand you don't have the exact amount. I think it was more, I was confused about the Facilities Committee, because I understand the not to exceed, but I thought we are telling you, please buy 28 of the Airedales.
So why can't we just delegate it to them?
Right. Why can't we as the board?
You want to delegate that to the administration? to go ahead and buy it rather than going through the facilities committee?
Well, I'm just confused. I don't understand the difference, because isn't that what we're doing? Don't we have the recs?
I
Don't we have-
personally feel more comfortable as the business administrator getting support from the facilities committee that is overseeing this.
That's we talked about, that's where that came from. We kind of went both ways, and that's the advice we were given by them.
Aren't we just authorizing the facilities committee tonight to take that action on our behalf, knowing that the amount will not exceed?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And Tom will come to us and say, here's what I would like to purchase. Could I have the authorization? And we will say, yes, within this parameter.
And can I just make 2 quick notes? One, we're talking about refrigerator-sized units to go into the classrooms. That doesn't describe the whole project that will be going on this summer. You know, the old air exchangers will come out,
Yes.
and the teachers are very happy that they'll be replaced by bookshelves.
Yes.
So it's not only that these units are going in, there's some other enhancements that will be made alongside.
Is there casement work
Yes,
being
there's
done?
casement
along
work.
with that? Okay.
Which will probably have
The second,
last.
the second thing is that we keep referring to Airedale, which is one of many manufacturers of similar units.
Yes.
And it's a name that both our architect and construction manager like. And that is the one we have to get by, I think, by going through the co-op. Because that's the one the state has said, if you go through us, so this saves us something like 6 weeks by doing it this way.
Right.
If we continue down the path that we're currently on and get to September or October and choose to go out to bid to one or more than one contractor, it's my understanding that we specify the technical specifications of the unit. That we're not permitted to specify the exact make and model, and that the contractor may substitute an equal product. So we just set expectations. If that's the way we go, it is possible that there will be one brand at Riverside and comparable units that are functionally as close to the same as possible that are a different brand at the other schools. So I make sure there isn't a mechanism for us to sort of specify that it be the exact same unit unless we agree to do it all through the co-op, which would be which we look at, but could be a significantly higher price. Is that?
Yeah, actually, you can specify Airedale, but the way that it was listed in your specifications is it would be Airedale unit or equivalent.
Okay, and they can substitute.
Okay, good. All right, are we comfortable? Can we do a roll call on this?
Yeah, we'll do a roll call.
Great.
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Calver-Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Measure passed, unanimous. Thank you.
Can we get one in this room?
We've got the new projector. Then now we're on to item 6, which is a consent, renewal of athletic transportation.
And 5.
Oh, 5, sorry. We're on to 5 first. Renewal of transportation contracts, 2019-20. It's a consent. Any discussion? Number 6, renewal of athletic transportation, consent. Number 7, non-public technology aid revised, consent. Number 8, fire and evacuation drills. Number 9, travel and related expenses. And then we come to the consent vote. Can I have a motion? Bill, second Betsy. All in favor, or do we want to do roll? No, all in favor, hands, please, show of hands. A unanimous, passed. Now we're on to public comment again, open topic. Would anyone like to make a comment? If you would, then please come to the podium, state your name and address, and we request that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Mary Clerman, Harris Road. I think I once exceeded the 3 minutes, and I certainly won't tonight. But can you hear me all?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, I want to thank you again for your new display of incredible leadership. I'm proud to see that the school board is acting as an equal to all other forces and actually asking some really hard questions, and I think that that's really what the community was looking for last year, so congratulations. I'm particularly interested in the comments on equity from Michelle and Debbie and Daniel, I guess in particular, maybe Betsy this time also. Last week you talked about restructuring, and I thought the restructuring was really going to address the question of the emphasis on competition for the elite as opposed to public education for all. It seems to me that one of the major topics in the country right now is the question of equity and the fact that we can't all succeed if we don't all succeed. And I've always thought also that one of the reasons that other countries can accuse us of being hypocritical with regard to what we define as freedom and democracy is that we don't treat everybody here equally. So that if we want to set the example for the world, what we should really do is focus on ourselves and take care of our own population. So I hope that with the restructuring, you will seriously consider that we're not talking about competition. When we talk about education, we're talking about competition for the whole world and for the whole society and for the whole culture. So that if you can in fact, trade off some of your elite and specialty courses for advanced placement and extra languages against tutoring for the disadvantaged. I think that's the only thing that I know about, but you probably know of other things as well. And I wondered also whether in the prepayment for your air conditioning materials, your equipment, you got a better price because you prepay. Sometimes they'll give you a better price if you prepay for something than if you pay for it later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? If not, are there closing comments of the board?
I just would like to say, one thing I'm interested in doing is on our calendar of our new website, when you click on a meeting, I know I've said this before, a meeting date, that a PDF of the agenda would pop up. So I'm trying to figure out, we can talk about the right way or the right process to do that, but that would just entail that community members, when those agendas are ready, when Patty receives them perhaps, that we figure out so that for the public, when you're considering whether to take time out of your busy life to attend a meeting, you can very easily see what's being discussed at that meeting. So we'll work on that.
Except personnel.
Well,
right. Yeah.
Yes, Michelle.
And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, we have a television channel, and I would so love to see our agendas up there, meeting announcements, spring concerts. If they had taped Shrek and or the High School Musical and put it up there, if that's possible, and I don't know, there's probably copyright stuff and all that stuff, but just performances by our kids, athletic endeavors. You know, there's so many great things that happen in this district, and we have a television station that does nothing for us, and it just makes me crazy. So that's, you know.
It's all about celebrating kids.
That's right.
May I address that, please?
Yes.
Yes.
We do take care of that in the technical department. We have for years put the messages up, and we have asked the buildings to give us material to put up on there. Sometimes when we make these requests, we get no response. The other thing is, too, also there is, we'd have to look at the performance rights to rebroadcast our the musicals on the television. That would probably be a copyright infraction. So we have to be very careful about how we do that. I agree with you. We should be doing more with that channel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
And just a scheduling note, again, as we talked about, it's the April 9th, right? We had kind of reserved that for if we needed an extra meeting next month. I think that we've talked about, I don't think we're not sure what we need to necessarily have on the agenda for that date, so I think we'll probably hold off and say we won't meet that day and hope people can go to the vaping presentation at JW at 7?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock? Thank you.
Yep.
So our meeting's April 23rd.
We have April 23rd
April
meeting,
23rd,
yes.
which is the budget hearing.
The
So-
budget hearing.
The one thing I just reiterate Dan's point about frequent and public information related to the referendum. So we had a nice presentation at the last meeting, and I hope we would have one at the April 23rd meeting, but that will take some time. So I also generally like the idea, I want to go to the vaping presentation of 2 meetings a month that are a bit shorter.
Yeah.
And allow the public to come and be able to speak and get home at a reasonable hour. And also for us to sometimes take on topics that we might not otherwise have time to take on, that allow us to better understand the work going on in all of the committees.
Yeah, well, we have 2 May meetings already scheduled in the original calendar. The April meeting will be, now we have special ed PTO is coming to the April meeting as well. It's the budget, it's going to be a big one again. It's going to be the budget hearing, special ed PTO, and then if we add referendum on there, it's going to be packed. So,
yeah, and I know that at some point coming up, we'll be asked to vote to, isn't there a tenure review process?
May 7th is the board meeting.
Right, so May 7th has to happen.
Okay, so a typical board thing is you have to understand the process in order to be able to, vote in an affirmative way.
We should have an
or
explanation.
not abstain. And I have zero information and would love whatever is available in writing or in a public setting, because I think that's something that the public really cares about too. How do we make decisions about tenure? And then later in the year, how are the performance reviews conducted?
Yep, exactly. We're going to do the same thing on the curriculum review, because we have certain things that we do every year as a regular cycle, and you have to look at when those happen, and the month before we need to have an explanation. So we already, keyed that up for the curriculum piece, but we can do the same thing.
We can do that. Yeah, Debbie, maybe you can meet with Mike when he comes on board. Get that all prepared. But I think that's an excellent suggestion.
But I do see this April 23rd meeting already looking like it's very chunky. I'm not sure how we're going to tackle that, because the special ed PTO couldn't do the April 9th date. It wouldn't have helped us. And I do think the vaping presentation is important.
But there is a group of us coming together on April 3rd to talk about communications regarding the referendum, project. So at that time, maybe we can take a look at another date and another forum, another place.
In April, maybe a meet the board or some other way of
to present what we're doing with the referendum.
Yeah.
And I would hope that group would give a lot of thought to how to get as much information as possible out to the PTOC, which is very effective at further delivering that information to other PTOs, and also using our website to the full extent possible to put up schedules, pictures of the units, and be as transparent as possible.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Can I say
go
one?
ahead.
Just as we approach the first day of spring, I think I'm safe in saying don't
do it.
No. Wait till after break. You can say
the current last day is June 20th, and currently we are planning to have school on the Friday before Memorial Day as a result of the 2 snow days that we've had thus far. But there shall be no more. Happy spring break, everyone.
My first year of teaching, I was in Connecticut my first year of teaching, and the only snow day we had that year was April 1st.
Yeah.
I thought it was an April Fool's joke on the new teachers, but it was actually a snow day.
So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dan, second. Jess.
It's my favorite motion.
Very nice.